Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure. My guest today is Mort Sherman. I will tell you all about Dr. Sherman in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show which deals with what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert toward others. And when you do it from a leadership position or in a position to help other people achieve their aims, you do it out of a spirit of grace and to bring people together. Dr. Mort Sherman, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
It's wonderful to be here, and I just love the opening description of what we're going to talk about today, Grace Under Pressure, and the whole idea about leadership and, getting stuck in that soft idea. My gosh, how wrong-headed is that? So I'm looking forward to this conversation, John.
Well, good. I want to tell folks all about you. The reason we're here is because we're talking about your brand new book called Resonant Minds, which is the transformative power of music, one note at a time. You are now retired, but you are a senior associate executive, school superintendent, so a longtime educator. You've been teaching for school for many, many years, and serving as a superintendent, done all kinds of stuff, widely published, and you're the co-author with your daughter of this wonderful book called Resonant Minds, the Transformative Power of Music, one note at a time. And by the way, the foreword was written by someone we all know, Goldie Hawn. So welcome to Grace Under Pressure, Mort Sherman.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
Right. Now, you spent your whole life in education. You're not a musician by training, although your daughter, who's the co-author, is a classically trained pianist. What drew you to want to explore music in this framework?
Ever since I was a little kid, music touched me deeply, and I never thought why or how and what circumstances. I just lived it and breathed it until our daughter came along, and all of a sudden our life was opened up and blossomed through her eyes and through her talent. Now, we have three daughters, and one, our oldest daughter, played the violin, still does play. Our youngest daughter is Sarah. Our middle daughter played the French horn and played the piano. But there was something special about what Sarah brought to us, about understanding and appreciating music. And she tells a story that has helped me understand your question, John, even more deeply, which is she used to listen to Rachel, our middle daughter, take piano lessons, and then Sarah would sneak into the piano room afterwards and play the same thing with her nose, with her toes, with her elbows, as she talks about it. There was something innate and wonderful about what went on in her head with music. Now, I believe everybody should have music, but I'm going to tell two other quick stories. One, I listened to my mother when I was very young sing a song. And the song, it goes back to World War I, to 1918, that her mother sang to her. And it's a song that goes something like, just give my love to mother, she'll know how much I love her. It was the troops leaving the United States to go fight overseas. My mother sang this song to me in the 60s, John. You and I are about the same age. My mother was a nurse, graduated Kings County Nursing School in Brooklyn, New York, and worked in a naval shipping yard with the Rosie the Riveters. Their husbands were all fighting, or their sons were all fighting. And so when I heard that story from my mother, who heard that song from her mother, it hit me so deeply that music transcends generations, touches emotions. And I knew at that point that it was always going to be part of my life, even though I was not as talented as our youngest daughter. I was not able to play the way she does, but I could, in many ways, use music in a very deep way as part of my life.
Well, you appreciate music, and anyone who plays an instrument is indebted to you, and because you keep us going. I'm, as many of our listeners know, I'm an amateur, quote, amateur pianist. So kudos to you. Now, we often talk now in our especially contentious times, the topic of empathy. You argue that music enhances empathy. How is that, Mort?
So I have an image, John, for leaders, regardless of the profession, whether it's education or whether it's making pajamas as my father-in-law did, or an auto mechanic. That was my father. But whatever your profession, there's this image, and I like, if I could hold up my hands with a baton as we do in our book, it's the image of the conductor facing the orchestra with the baton raised. And I think each has the ability to be the conductor of our own lives. So it's not just about music appreciation, it's about respect and using music as a lever, as a means by which we gain respect and trust of others. And so this idea of using music, of being part of music, is because it's part of us. There's not any one of us who doesn't spend 2, 3, 4 hours listening to music. Could be in the background, could we bring it forward, could be whatever it may be. But this idea of that conductor of our lives is what we're writing it about deeply and using deeply as a way of improving who we are, how we connect with others, and maybe improving our world around us.
That's great. Now, but there is work involved. Now, in my world, we use the term active listening, meaning if you are getting the receiver of a message, pay attention, involved. You take that metaphor, that concept to music. What is active listening when it comes to music, listening to music? So,
Well, this concept of active listening, whether it's implicit, it's the back of our head, or explicit coming to the front, we deliberately, purposefully, intentionally use music. The concept of active listening is also something that we believe in as the conductor of our own lives, is that we listen to the music. And I'm going to, I understand, John, this is a podcast and there's lots of commercial products out there, but without naming or knocking any of those commercial products, that concept of being an active listener and an active user is really important. For example, I bet you as a pianist have a playlist somewhere in your head, or your family has a playlist. And so what's happened with commercial playlists is they become the feedback loop of the familiar, which means that it's the same playlist. And then commercial products feedback that loop. Oh, here's 50 more songs that you might like, and you want to buy them, by the way, and it narrows. And it narrows and it narrows us. So just as when we go shopping online, it narrows what we listen to. And so this concept of active listening is a lever of being active so that we could listen to a broader array of music. I want to give you a story.
yeah.
Go ahead. You want to ask a question? Because
No, it's
I'm
funny
excited by
because
this story.
you're actually talking to someone who does not have a playlist, and until recently, I didn't even
Oh,
know what a playlist was. And I know what the concept is, but no, you're very accurate. And it's basically it's a marketing effort. It just as you go into a supermarket, you search for a brand, you don't look at other brands. You want Kellogg or General Mills or whatever it is that pops out to you. You screen out everything else. So please tell me your story. So yeah.
yeah. So this question. So you started naming products. I'm going to tell you, whether it's Spotify or Amazon Music or any of those, they are commercial products designed to sell you something even broader and deeper. I'm actually not broader, but deeper and narrower. So I want this idea of active music listening to be a lever. I'm going to tell you the story about our grandson, our 15-year-old grandson. You and I were talking before about the blessings and the grace of grandchildren in our lives. So we get this good fortune each morning to talk to our middle daughter, who's a teacher, middle school teacher. And she drives her son. He goes to a high school, but so they drive together and they call us 2 or 3 times a week on the way there. And after our book was published, I was curious what 15-year-old boys are listening to. And he's a musician. And so I was pressing him. He said, well, I'm going to tell you really honestly, my dad loves country music, and I tried to like it, but I don't. My
Mhm.
mom likes 80s and 90s, and I try to like it, but I moved away from it. And I know you and Grandma like classical music and Simon and Garfunkel and music from the 60s. And I know Aunt Sarah likes classical music because she's a classical pianist. And I said, so what do you like? He said, well, when I want to calm, when I want to find myself and find my voice, I listen to indie music. So, John, do you know what indie music is?
I
Because
have
I
listened
didn't.
to it for 50 years. Yes, on and
So
off. Yeah.
you're,
Ravi
so
Shankar.
you're
Yeah.
exactly. So we didn't know because we were stuck in our feedback loop
Mhm.
of the familiar. So my wife and I, being really good parents and being humiliated by a 15-year-old boy who said, "You don't know
Not
what music
humiliated.
is."
It's educated. It's educated,
Yeah,
Mort,
there
not
we go.
humiliated.
So we went to all the search engines, found out what indie music is, and then spent the day listening to indie music. Do you know why? And this is for your HR professionals, for any leader out there. It's because I love and respect my grandson, and I want to give him voice and agency. And so I listened to his music the next day. When we talked to him, I said, "How about this? How about this song? Or how about this artist?" And I could tell he was filled with joy. That story has brought us even closer. We have a great relationship. But imagine doing that as a leader on a regular basis, figuring out through trust and respect what others are listening to, and to talk about it and to think about it. If music is so implicit, it's so much a part of it, the way my mother's song and her mother's song, my grandmother's song becomes part of who we are as people. We all have those stories. How do we unleash them and expand? And that's what Sarah and I in writing this book are after. Going from this implicit, these phonological loops in our heads, to actually the explicit and deliberate intentional use of music. Go ahead, John.
No, that's great. No, it reminds me of a Marine Corps general I once profiled, and he was one of those that the officers eat last type, of course. But it was also more importantly when he went into the corporate sector, he made it a point to be there with the employees, and he was a senior executive. But he told me this little trick he would go in the days when I think we still have them cubicles. He would go from cubicle to cubicle and comment on the photographs that people had of some, usually children, and he would say, "How's that little equestrian? How's that ball player?" and get people to speak if they wanted to. What you talked about is a music instead of a photograph. It's a piece of music, so it's a lovely thing. So getting into the workplace, go ahead, please. So
Well, yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. I'm reading the wall behind you, and it's a rather plain, beautiful brick wall. But if you look behind this shoulder, my left shoulder, you can see books. But it's the same thing because we're in this virtual world. I love reading rooms. You know, the rooms behind people and their virtual things. You could tell so much. Sometimes you could even see what books are on their shelves and start a conversation, or you could look back behind me and see what kind of knickknacks I have up there. And so your story is so much on target. That leader who went around to the different cubicles, it's the same thing, but this time it's poking at music, which is a deep part of all of our lives. We have some statistics that 70% of the people listen to music 3 or 4 hours a day, whether it's in the elevator, at grocery stores, playing music on their own. But it's there, it's ubiquitous. And it's how do we deliberately make that music, which is part of us, not just a cubicle conversation. But I got to tell you one more story, because can I tell you one
Oh,
more?
I got to cut you
So
here because I've started to laugh when you're the only
okay,
person I
go
think
ahead.
I've ever met who's saying something complimentary about elevator music, but I know what you're doing. It's
Oh, no,
funny.
no, I didn't say anything. I didn't
No,
say anything complimentary about
no.
elevator music. You know,
I'm
that's a
just
whole
te-
business that was
no, I'm just teasing you. But it's important. No, the music is there, and it's a soothing aspect. There's nothing wrong with it. So anyway, I'm sorry. Tell me your story. So,
Yeah, this concept of the leader walking from cubicle to cubicle that you just told, I love that story. Let's take it to the next level. How did he connect the people in the cubicles? Once he looked at the pictures or saw what their children or what their spouses are doing. And so this story is like, I have a son-in-law who just a sports fanatic, and I'm not a sports fanatic. I don't understand it. When he talks about the Washington Commanders or the Nationals, he uses the pronoun we. And I said, "That's great. You bought part of the
yeah,
team. I don't
yeah.
understand that." And he kind of like leaned back in his 40-ish way of looking at me and said, "Well, Mort, let me share with you. When I go to a ball game, there is a community. When I go to a concert, there is a community. There is a network." And he said, "That's what sports do for me. That's what music can do. But it's not just going to the cubicle, it's going beyond that. It's going and creating those networks." And so what we want to do is figure out, because I'm going to tell you a story, John, in every conversation I have from now on about the cubicle. How do you network the cubicles into communities through music?
Well, I'm one of the themes that I've worked on and believe very firmly is the workplace can be a sense of community because if it fosters belonging. So, how can music foster this
Yeah.
sense of belonging, Mort? So,
Yeah, again, I'm not a sports fanatic. I like sports. I was always an athlete. When I was growing up near Philadelphia, there was Kate Smith singing with the
oh,
Philadelphia Flyers. I
yeah,
think that's during the God Bless America, right?
yeah,
And that deep, wonderful voice she had, God bless, and then
mm,
everybody would sing together, and you would walk away with that spirit and with that joy. But there's leaders throughout our history, and there's one song, John. Let's see, as a musician, whether or not you could identify the one song in our American history which has come from George Washington to the present day. And I'll give you 10 seconds. And you'll know it immediately. Amazing Grace. Amazing
ah,
Grace was
yeah,
written and part of all of our traditions. It was written in the 1750s by an enslaver who was coming over from Great Britain, from UK to the
yeah.
United States, and going through a terrible storm. Woke up the next morning having survived, and saw the sun, and he wrote Amazing Grace, which became part of hymnals. And if George Washington had Amazing Grace as part of it. Barack Obama sang Amazing Grace after that terrible tragedy down in South
Yeah.
Carolina. FDR, Marian Anderson sang George Bush in the 10-year anniversary in 2011 or 2001, he used Amazing Grace. And so there is that ability to take beyond the cubicles to thread through our lives that music which is part of our heads,
No,
part of our
that's a
culture.
powerful. Yeah, I hadn't realized how ingrained. I know the song. I play the song. My grandmother was a gifted pianist and played in her church, but also taught like you. She was a teacher, but her discipline was music, and I know she played it, of course, and I've come to play it. And it is a song of great comfort. It's a song of faith,
It is.
and so music reinforces faith. I mean, something the Catholic Church has been doing for 2,000 years or something, but and Protestant faith too. And uh, I think that it's simple hymns cut to the quick, like poetry. Do you have a perspective on that, Norm? Like a Mort? So
Like cut to the quick so that it,
they're.
you know
It's a form of poetry. It expresses emotions that we can't do strictly verbally. Whatever. So
Well, I mean, there's a lot of research. Jonathan Sachs worked with, Oliver Sacks with
yes,
some of the patients. Me that the way of getting inside of some of the patients who are not able to verbalize, and certainly with some of the neurodivergent children who react to music. There's this beautiful line that some people talk about is that when all else does not make it, music is that which gives us voice. And that I built, when it gives us voice, whether it's you playing the piano, or starting with that A as the orchestra tunes, or um, Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, whatever the song is, it gives us that connection, that ability to network with others, and I don't memorize well. It's one of my learning disabilities, but I could speak well, and I know the facts, and I know what's going on. But when I hear music, just as you do, John, or probably the listeners as well, there is something which goes beyond it. So my daughter, in one of her presentations, answers your question by singing a couple songs. So let's try. So if I just start, John, just two or three notes. This is how it goes to the quick and goes fast. Da-da, da-da. What is that?
it's a theme from John Williams. So
Everybody knows that, right?
yeah.
So that visceral, quick reaction, that's what music does for us. Or how about bringing it together, again, as a leader, You Are My Sunshine. Do you know that song?
I
Of
can't
course
sing
you
it,
do.
but yeah, I've played it. Yeah, it's a
Here's
heartwarming
another
song. Yeah.
here's another heartwarming song that Marian Anderson sang. I already used her name.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you one of the most compelling examples. I was visiting when a group of kids down in Tampa Florida, about 10, 15 years ago. And when I was visiting them, it was in a rural district in the strawberry fields outside of Tampa. And the parents, the migrant workers, had just picked the strawberries that we were eating for breakfast that morning. And the children of the migrant workers came in and sang to us. And they sang a song, This land is my land, this land is your land. And that song, again, cuts to the quick. You don't have to think deeply about the lyrics. You don't have to know deeply all the words, but there's something within us that connects us and really emotionally binds us together as people. And I'm absolutely convinced that if leaders think about those powerful opportunities and possibilities that exist, we could use music to connect, to bind those simple songs. Because just as you knew Jaws right there, John, everybody knew Jaws, right? Or if I did a couple beats from Lean on Me, everybody knows those. So how do leaders build on the familiar to go and beyond the familiar, to stretch, to connect?
Which is my question, because you use the term in the book of the resonant leader. A resonant mind is the theme, is the title of your book, Resonant Leader.
Yep.
And you talk about how it can, music can, if I understand correctly, how can music encourage innovation? So, because we're all obsessed with innovation. So, what role does music have in that, Mort?
Yeah, let me get to innovation in a second. But in the research I've done, with a number of different companies across the country for the past 10 years, I look at three elements of leadership today: nimbleness, resilience, and resonance. You can't survive in this world, in this month, whether it's Ann Arbor, Michigan, or Leesburg, Virginia, or wherever you are, unless you're nimble. And you can't survive unless you're resilient. If you look at the turnover in superintendent of schools or leaders or CEO, there's just some research that just came out. The number of interim leaders and interim CEOs is astronomical right now. But the concept of resonance is a survival skill for leaders, which is, do I understand those with whom I work? Do I appreciate and listen to those with whom I work? Because if you're going to be simply top down and dictatorial, you're not going to move them ahead. Lincoln was a great example. Abraham Lincoln, talk about resident leader. He was able to feel, he was able to understand. And when the South, I think this is historically accurate, but when the South surrendered at Appomattox, Virginia, he played Dixie. Isn't that
Well,
amazing?
yes, he visited Richmond before, it was before this, or after, it was before it, because Richmond had fallen. And yes, and
Yes.
he did play that. Yeah, he did. He actually liked the song,
But,
and
but think of
yeah.
the resonance of it, John, that he knew that bring the country back together. If he had just played the Battle Hymn of the Republic or some other song more associated with the North, it was hard anyway, if Reconstruction. But he was resonant. He knew enough. Or I'll give you another great example for the historical buffs out there. FDR and the fireside chats that he sat there, and people, Doris Kearns Goodwin talks about this. Everybody went home when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was on the radio, and they went home like, because my president is talking to me. But if you ever hear some of those recordings, he used music. He actually listened to the music, played the music so that he could bring people together. Or if
I
you,
never knew that.
just
I know, know a lot about FDR, written about FDR. I never knew about the music. Wonderful. So, yeah.
I'm going to have my daughter send you an FDR playlist. We sometimes go into, we sometimes
Yeah.
go into AI. You and I were talking about that before in
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. And I said, hey, tell me a playlist that FDR, or tell me a playlist that George Washington might have had that he might have listened to. So it's Mozart or whatever it may be. But when you come through the years and the generations and this idea of leaders using music to be resonant, it's because they know out there that I like country, I like classical, but you might not, John. And so how do I bring you into my world and I enter your world so that we can move forward together for common vision, common purpose? That's what I think great leaders do. I think that's what resonance is.
It reminds me of a story. There's a very gifted guitarist and singer Billy Strings, and he comes from the bluegrass culture. I don't. He's maybe 30, whatever. So he's a young man. But he said, speaking about music, he said you can with the thing that what I like to play, and he plays a lot of folk music, Doc Watson in particular. But he said you can take an old song and make it sound new, and a new sound make it sound old. And I think that gets to what we talked about is community, how a leader connects with that audience through music. Do you have a perspective on that, Mort? So.
Oh, I think that is so true. Again, the example is our daughter Sarah when she does "You're My Sunshine." Not only should take the song and make it sound old or new, but she could do a different cadence, different pattern, different rhythm, and then she could beat out "You are my sunshine, you are my sun," or she can go "You are my sunshine," and so you're right. So the ability to adjust. Again, John, when we get, I'll bring my daughter back in another show, but this whole idea of the neuroscience, the concept
Mhm.
of groove, do you know that groove is
Yep.
a scientific term,
Mhm.
not just a
I
musical
didn't know it
term?
was a
Did you know?
scientific, but I know what the groove is. Yes. So, yeah.
What, do you know what groove biologically is, physiologically?
I do not. Tell me, please. So.
So I'll tell you real quickly. So again, when leaders resonate, they resonate through groove, which is the matching of the beats of the heart. And actually the rhythm of the heart and they if you look at you as a musician, John, know that there's a beat and a pattern that goes you into groove. The people sway, right? They connect. Why are you doing that? Because you go with groove, with the music, with the beats per minute and the heartbeat. There's all this neuroscience and physiological proof how we connect deeply physically with music, not just cognitively.
Well, there's no more swaying and resonance than in a black church service when the preacher and the band are going together. Everybody is swinging and in that groove. So,
Yeah, and there's a part of the book. There's a superintendent, a colleague of mine, Greg Hutchings, who was superintendent in Alexandria, Virginia, before that in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and he talked exactly about what you did when he grew up. He wasn't a churchgoer, but he discovered the spirituality and the music of the church. And now he goes to church every day. He says, "Oh, I go for the music." He said, "I go for the music, but it's not just for the music. But the music
yeah.
brought him back to the church." And you're right. But there is not any one church. I mean, the Catholic, great Catholic tradition. Peace be with you. I mean, there's every religion is based in that sound, that rhythm, that connection, and music is such an integral part of it. Not just particular churches and black communities. Or that Latino communities. I mean, it's just filled with joy in their music.
Absolutely, and that again, that music becomes that link, our sense of community. But it's not exclusive. It may be germane to a particular faith or group, but it is transportable, and that's draws people to it. So now, sadly, we are racing through our show, and I'm. As you know, I ask every guest a story about grace. Do you have one you'd like to share with us, Mort? So.
I do. I do have one. I want to start with very small one, and then a little longer one in the minute or two we have left. I just got a note this morning from a student I taught at Glasgow High School in Newark, Delaware, in 19, oh, I don't even know when, 72, 73. She was a student in my class. So you know how old she is already. And she said, "Oh my God, I love your book." And I've been following you on Facebook and I've never said hello before. What a joy. What a moment of grace to hear from a student from over 50 years ago. I'm so happy to hear that. But the more important story is that this book is not a book about music or music appreciation. It is a book about love for ourselves and for others. And through music, we deepen that love. I wrote a book with our daughter. How many people get to say that? Or get to say that we wrote a chapter about our middle daughter, who's a middle school special ed neurodivergent a children teacher, or our oldest daughter was the web designer. Two of our grandchildren contributed on the web design. They all are mentioned in the book because of the stories that they have taught us, like our grandson Ethan on indie music. And my wife is the designer. She, all the art in there is for my wife. The grace we have is recognizing that as a family, this book is about love, and we wish that for every family in the country who reads this book and beyond, even if you don't read it. Music is a way of connecting and filling your life.
Now that is a beautiful story. I've heard lots of author stories, a few about grace, but none that involves the whole family as you've done. What a wonderful, enriching story. So, Mort, how can people find you and the book? So,
Well, part of the book, by the way, I love this part of it, John. I hope you do. If you get a chance, there's a QR code for every single song we mentioned in the book. So you can look at that QR code, hold it up to your phone, and it'll take you to our website where you can get a live link to listen to the music while you read the book for all 150 or 200 pieces of music. And people are contributing more. Feel free to go to Resonant Mind and add to our playlist. We're happy to do that. My email is on there. It's 64msherman@gmail.com. But so either email or through the website. But please use the QR codes because we want to connect all of the folks to that music and not just have a book that you read and put it on the shelf as all the books are behind me.
Mort Sherman, and such a pleasure to interview you today about your brand new book that you wrote with your daughter, Sarah, called Resonant Minds, The Transformative Power of Music, One Note at a Time. And with that, sir, we will go out.